Hello, this is Coach Aaron Saft, the Running is Life podcast. Today, I am going to poke fun at myself and my profession because if we can't make fun of ourselves, who can we really make fun of? And that's the great thing about ourselves. We can't take ourselves too seriously sometimes. So yeah, I'm going to talk about coaching and the different types of stereotypical coaches, and what you can see in each, and what I find are good qualities within a coach, and what I've strived and evolved to try to become. I'm not there yet. I'm still trying. I'm still evolving. I'm still learning. And I think that's part of the process, but there's a lot out there. Um, and there's a lot of coaches out there. So, if you can put them in this kind of category and distinguish if this is the best system for you, this might help you if you're looking for a coach. I myself, I finished up with a number of athletes as of September, so I will have some roster openings if anyone is interested in coaching, especially after listening to this conversation. If it intrigues you and you want to reach out to me, number of ways to do so, and they're in the show notes. So feel free to communicate with me. Before I take a deep dive into the types of coaches and the stereotypes that I found, and make myself laugh, I want to just say how proud I am of everyone that contributed and how grateful I am to everyone that contributed to the new trail at Rugby Middle School. I've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast. I've put it out on social media, the different work days and such, and I had such a great response. I want to first thank the Carolina Mountain Club. They were integral in finishing this project. We are finished with the trail, which is just incredible. There's a little section where there's a ground hive and we're trying to get rid of the bees, and we just have to finish the tread work there. But this trail is pretty much complete. We built a bridge on Sunday. I want to thank Nathan Elliott. He probably will never listen to this episode. And also Jimmy Houlihan, for both of their contributions in building that bridge. It was incredible to see how quickly that went up. We had to carry the lumber up to it, and those guys got to work and got cracking. And within like maybe 3 hours, they had a beautiful bridge. You can see that one. It's the single rail bridge on my social media post. Just incredible. So the Carolina Mountain Club built another longer expanse bridge. It's the double railed, the handrail bridge that you'll see in that same post. They did amazing. They made signs. I was they said I should name it Saft's Trail, which we did, and they made signs for me. It's just incredible. It feels so good to have this completed. The trail itself is about 0.73 in distance, so almost 3/4 of a mile. But the amount that went into it, the amount of labor that went into this, and the amount of manpower that we put into this, including the cross country team, some of my athletes, people from the community, it's just incredible to see. It all came together, and now we have this awesome trail, which we can all enjoy. Um, Rugby is open after hours, so they ask that people do not use it while school is in session. That includes athletics, but these are open to the public. We hope to create more. I've been really fortunate to work with Dr. John McDarris at Rugby Middle. He's the principal there, and just allowing me to get out there, especially with Carolina Mountain Club, and work. We are going back actually, as you listen to this, we'll be going out. If you're listening to this on Thursday, we'll be going out and working on the trail again. Not the new trail. We're going to be working on the other trails to try to get some roots up. We hope to have by September 28th. We're running the Truly Tough Cross Country Classic. It's the first year for this event, but we're having a public 5K, as I've mentioned. I'll put the link in the show notes. You can register on Ultra Sign Up. It's $25. There are awards, but that's really the only frills for this race. We're really trying to raise money for the cross country programs. So if you can't race but can contribute, please reach out. We're happy to accept any contributions to the team so that these guys can continue to compete and go to fun races and do fun things. So I appreciate those that have contributed thus far. Ashley Natalia, thank you for your donations. I really do appreciate that. So if you can do that, you're wonderful. And the kids sincerely appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for reaching out, especially after this last episode. I know I bear a lot on this podcast, and I am open and honest, and the feedback that I receive is wonderful. I want to thank you all so much for telling me your stories. It was, I had, I'll be honest, I cried a number of times reading your stories, and how amazing you people are. It's wonderful. It's touching. As you can hear in my voice, it's touching to be able to reach out through my voice and into your ears and strike a nerve, strike a chord, resonate with you. We all go through the same things, and sometimes we feel like we go through them alone, but we don't. We're all here, and hey, if I need to be a sounding board, I'm here. I love to hear your stories. I love to talk about races and your training and how things are going, and anything I can help with. And that's kind of the impetus behind this episode. The types of coaching. I will say that I came up with 10 stereotypical coaches. I will say that I have been through the vast majority of these. I have been this coach at one point in time or another, perhaps not for long, realizing that, I could do better or be better, or that, I needed to evolve and become more. Um, so as I go through these, know that I've probably been there at some point. I've probably touched on a piece of each of these at some time. So I'm not picking on any one individual or coach. If you fall into this category, maybe you recognize it. And maybe like me, you recognize, hey, I can probably do better and need to do better for my athletes. Um, I'm not gonna, like I say, I'm not gonna try to pick on specific coaches. I'm just saying here are the types that you can be aware of and what you're gonna see from these type of coaches. So when you get into it, you can kind of be aware ahead of time of what you might be getting into, especially as they talk to you. Hopefully, they talk to you prior to starting coaching and let you know what their system is, how they coach, what you should expect from them. And we've done episodes previously about, finding the right coach. But here are my 10, my top 10 list. So I'm going to start with the athlete. I've kind of titled each of these, and the athlete is usually the youngest, the coach. They may have been a really successful runner in school, be it high school, college, even a post collegiately. They're young in their career, but they feel that they've trained a certain way and it's been successful for them, and that's how you should train. And that's not to say that all young coaches are this way. But there's a lot of young professionals that try to make a name for themselves as a coach because they've had success and they want to share their success with the program that they've used, which, it could work, but not necessarily for everyone. And that's what I realized. So going back, this was me a long time ago. I've been coaching for 24 years now. So when I was fresh out of college, this was Aaron, the athlete. Like, I've trained this certain way, under the guises of coaches like Raleigh Geiger at NC State. I learned his program and learned what he did. I always ask questions. And, at times I think he thought it was disrespectful. And it wasn't that I was trying to be disrespectful. I was trying to understand what were the principles and methodologies that he was using in order to train us. How was that making us better runners? I was just trying to understand the process, I wasn't trying to buck the system. And I think he felt that way sometimes because normally athletes, especially in college, they just follow. It's just here's the program, here's what you're doing, go. They don't normally ask why. Why are we doing this? What's the purpose behind this, right? And that's as we're going to get into later, a good coach should be able to explain to you. Yes, this is why we're doing it. This is the reason behind this. This is what we're hoping to improve and, and gain from doing this type of workout. But usually, like I said, the youngest is the athlete. Again, you're going to see that they've had some sort of success, and that they're trying to bring this program over and get into coaching, which is fine. That's a good way to start. That's how I started. Again, but just know what to expect. Okay. Um, and from there, it can go a billion different ways. Um, Usually, we'll go into this one. We'll call the I call it the certificate. This is when a coach gets a certification from some sort of coaching organization. Usually, and I've done this myself, posted on social media, hey, I just got certified by X, right? Whoever the coaching certification process is coming from. They're like, I'm a coach now. And they have, gone through this course, which it teaches you some fundamentals, which is great. And I think that's awesome. What I will say about this is that, unless this person has had some sort of mentorship with another coach, that certificate does not give them a lot of information about programming. That is the thing that most coaching certifications miss out on. It's really hard to teach, and it would take a long time to teach programming. That would be a really long course because there's a lot that goes into programming. So that's typically what's skipped, and that's typically what most people ask the most about. They may touch on it briefly, but there isn't a lot on actually giving the coaches a good idea of what they should be doing week in and week out so far as programming goes. So the certificate is a great start, but what I suggest, especially if you're a coach and you're listening to this and you've gone through the certificate, I suggest you find someone to mentor you. I've mentored many other coaches and helped them along their path to growing. A lot of people, that I coach, they've become coaches themselves and they've started to use the principles and learn from, exactly what I did and started their own coaching practices, which is great. I want my athletes to learn and grow, and that's going to be another piece of what I talk about later on. So the certificate can be a great starting point, but I think it needs a little bit more robust background. So if the person just gained their certificate, it's good to ask them, okay, you got the certificate. What type of experience have you had with coaching? If you're their first client and they may just be getting off the ground and they're like, hey, I'll do it for free because I just want to start to, get used to programming and stuff. But that coach, and again, if you're one of the coaches listening, find a mentor. My first mentor was Ben Thomas. Now, that name may not resonate with many people, but the next name that I'm about to say, and I don't mean to name drop, it's probably going to resonate pretty hard. Cole Hocker, the Olympic 1500-meter champion. Ben Thomas is his coach. That is my first mentor. That is the first person that I sat down with and said, why are you doing this? What is the idea? Again, Raleigh Geiger was fantastic, but he didn't really get into explaining it much to us. And maybe I should have sat down with office time and not asked at practice. Maybe I did it improperly. But it was Ben Thomas that allowed me to be, a volunteer assistant. He was at Virginia Tech at the time. This is well before he was coaching Cole Hocker. And I could sit down in his office and I could talk to him. I could go for a run with him and talk to him and ask questions. Why do you do this? How can you do that? And I started learning from Coach Ben Thomas. That was my first mentor. Then I've had a number of coaches along the way, from Howard Nippert, who was one of our outstanding 100K champions, Patrick Reagan. I've had David Roche. I've had a slew of different coaches that I've been under, that I've, kind of looked at their systems, see how they do things. And I take something from each of them. So that's another piece of it, is being coached yourself. So you see what's out there, see what you like, what you don't like, what you think you could improve on, what you can take away. That's all great things for, a coach to grow. right? So having the certificate, that's a great start. It is. But that's how you start to grow is, gain that mentorship. Have another coach that's coaching you so you can get coached and see how does programming work. That works really well. Okay. So keep growing. That's the certificate coach. Okay. The next one, I'm gonna talk about this one, and I feel awful because I did this at one point in my career. It was when I was super busy. I was still working and running FootRx, the running store, and doing coaching on the side. And that's kind of another springboard into, is your coach doing it full time or are they doing it part time? I was guilty of what we call copy and paste. I copied a program and pasted it into the schedule for the runner. That was awful of me. That was, I still feel guilty for doing that. James, if you are listening to this, I don't mean to call the name out, but I honestly am truly sorry for being that coach. I did not give that individual the attention and time they deserved and that they were paying me for. And I know I did not do them justice. That was not the right thing to do. But that happens. We see a program and we're like, oh, this is wonderful. Let me just have the runner do this. And basically you copy and paste over. Or, they're taking what another athlete is doing if they're doing a similar event, and they copy their training and paste it into yours. Had that happen as well. It does not feel good. So that's why I apologize and why I feel awful. I just don't think it's a good way to train athletes because it doesn't give them the individualized attention that they deserve. If you feel that's happening, if you feel you're just getting a copy and paste, I would say, hey, talk to your coach and say, hey, is this what's going on? Because I'm feeling like I'm not doing what's right for me or best for me, because that's what it should be about, right? So that's the copy and paste coach. The next one is in some vein a little bit similar to the copy and paste, and that's the cookie cutter planner, right? That the cookie cutter planner is I've got a 16-week program to get you ready for your marathon, right? I've got a 24-week program ready to get you for your 100 miler, but it is not individually designed. It is like you could look in a book and say, "Oh my, here's the plan," right? And that's what the coach is selling. They're selling you these individualized, they call them individualized. They're these, whatever it be, 12, 16, 24-week programs that are one size fits all. They're not going to tailor it to you. It is what you get. And there's a lot of problems to that, right? They're not individualized. It could be too much. Oftentimes, when people say, hey, I've been following this plan, and I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, that is way too much. You don't need to be doing that much. That's like what I see most often is these cookie cutter plans that are just having people do too much. And then, if you're doing too much, how do you know how to adjust it? Right. Then how do you know you're doing too much? So that's because you're not getting feedback. You're just getting a schedule. You're paying for a schedule and you're not getting any feedback. Now, there are coaches that have a cookie cutter plan, and they'll give you some feedback. And that's a different way of coaching. Like I said, if they're adjusting it, that's coaching, right? If they're just sticking to the plan and making you do it and just making comments, but not adjusting, there's not much coaching going on. Okay. And then if you miss a chunk of the training, what happens? What do you do? Right? Do you keep going with where the plan's at? Do you go back? These are things that you have to know, especially if you're buying one of these things. Like, what is the communication after you buy it? Is there any communication after you buy it? So I would be really careful with buying cookie cutter plans. I know sometimes it's a very cost effective way to do things, but there are drawbacks to it. So find out what those drawbacks are. Okay. All right. Um, I laugh because I look at each of these and it's tough to pick. Let's go with the next one, the disciple. Okay. The disciple has taken a course and has become just enamored with the principles that have been applied by that certification. I'll take, for instance, the Lydiard Foundation. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. The certification is wonderful. It teaches you a lot, but they are so Lydiard's pyramid is the way. Any other way is not going to work. Is not going to be successful. And that's hard to swallow. I've gone through level 3 in Lydiard, so I've learned a ton. I've learned a ton. And I've learned how to apply some amazing principles because of it. But I don't say that this is the only way. It is not the only way to train. There are so many different ways to train, right? And that's what I say. Like, understand that there's different systems out there. It doesn't mean that every system is right for every person, right? There's Jack Daniels. There's so many different great coaches out there that have amazing principles that can be applied to individuals that it will work best for. And that's coaching, is knowing what's best for the athlete and doing what's best for the athlete, finding that way. It's like solving a puzzle. But the disciple just follows blindly because that's what they've been told is the right way or the only way. That's the disciple. The next one is the scientists. The scientists are ever experimenting, right? And I think that's good. Because they're trying to find what works for you. But if they keep trying and you've already found what works for you, that can be questionable at times. But I think the scientist is a great coach because they're constantly learning and evolving, right? I almost put myself as a scientist if we're going to classify me as someone here. I would say the scientist is probably the closest of what I am because I like to research and hear from all of these different, I have so many different certifications at this point because I love to continue to learn and evolve and grow and understand principles, especially what's coming on, these days, the latest, right? And that's the next person we'll talk about, the latest and greatest. But the scientists, they continue to try, right? Well, let's try this. Does this work? And I myself am a scientist upon myself now. I experiment upon myself and say, hey, does this work? How does this go? What does this feel like? Should I try this with X athlete, right? So, the scientist is not only coaching the athlete, but sometimes they're experimenting on themselves, right? Well, does this work? Okay. Again, going back to what I said earlier, just because it necessarily may work for oneself. So if it works for me, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for everybody. But if you understand the athlete and they have, that given need for that given type of stimulus, then that's a great match. But you have to know what it is and how it works, right? So that's the scientists. They're ever learning, ever experimenting. As I mentioned, the next one is the latest and greatest coach. And that's, let's do double lactate sessions. That's the biggest, latest and greatest, right? I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's doing 2 lactate threshold workouts in one day. It's a Norwegian system. Jakob Ingebrigtsen, he's famous for these double lactate threshold sessions all within one day. So the latest and greatest is trying to do what they hear at the moment, right? They're not waiting for the science. It's just let's put it out there because it is new. It's shiny, right? They don't necessarily know it works. Now, double lactate it's got some good evidence behind it now, but this is the coach that's always trying to be at the forefront. I'm doing the latest scientific training methodologies, and again, it may be something that maybe it needs a little bit more time to prove that it's worth doing. So be careful of the latest and greatest. I just give that one with a a little warning. Okay, the next coach is the jack of all trades. The jack of all trades tries to wear too many hats. I've talked in the past that we have to know our lanes as a coach. As a coach, I have a specific job and I can't really veer too far from that. And for instance, when I'm coaching and if an athlete has an injury and comes to me and says, "This hurts, what do you think it is?" I have to say, "Hey, listen, I can tell you what it sounds like. I cannot diagnose you." And by far, I shouldn't try, to tell you what to do if it's really hurting. That's for medical professionals, right? Another example would be nutrition, right? We have guidelines for what we should be using and training with in runs, right? But once we get outside of that scope, right, we start talking about our macros and such, right? Or they want to lose weight and they want to change their diet to do so. That's outside of my scope. Yes, I have an exercise nutrition certificate, but it does not make me capable of suggesting these things. That is for a registered dietitian. So I have to stay in my lane. And the jack of all trades, and I've been guilty of this in the past, they go outside of their scope. They start saying, "Oh, that's, X injury. This is what you should do." If they don't have that sort of training, if they don't have that sort of educational background, that is outside their scope. They should not be doing that. They could be doing more harm to that athlete than good. So be careful of the jack of all trades. All right. The next one is the hive. The hive. The hive. And this is, I would say, the coaching conglomerate, right? Like they have a certain amount of coaches under them. They're very clicky. And this is for some people. I get it. I've never been of the hive, never been the hive mentality. I've been asked to be a part of Carmichael Training Systems, CTS. I was recruited by Jason Koop, but I'm just not a Hive member. Like, I don't want to be part of a conglomerate. I like being an individual coach. I like, having my own independence. There's advantages to the Hive for coaches. There are some great advantages to the Hive. So, when I say this, if you're being trained by a conglomerate of coaches, that's okay. That's great. As long as it's working for you, that's awesome. I've never really liked to have been a part of the hive mentality because I find that, again, there's not a lot of differentiation. They try to match a coach with the athlete, which is good, to have a variety of coaches within the collective. But again, it just has never been for me. So they're out there. They can be a bit more pricey because what you're doing is you're not only paying the coach, you're also paying the collective group. So whoever's in charge of the group is receiving a cut of that. So you're typically going to have a higher expense. The last one, number 10, is the trainer. The trainer is the coach that's been doing this for years and is stuck in the system. They're not going to change. This is how they've been doing it for years. This is how it worked. I was on a Zoom call with a number of coaches and, somebody asked a question, well, how do you, track their metrics? How do you track progress and make sure they're doing this right and everything's going okay? And the coach's response was, I've been doing this for so long, it just works. That's never a good answer. That is never the answer that you should hear from a coach. They should be looking at your metrics. If you're not getting your metrics looked at, you have to consider how much you're paying, right? So if you're not paying a lot and you're just getting a plan, okay. But if you're paying for a coach to do their job and they're not looking at your metrics, you may want to say, hey, how do you know how I'm doing? And if they just say, well, I'm basing it off of your feedback, that's a piece of it. That's great. Communication on your part and how you're doing is a huge piece of that pie, but your metrics also kind of tell a story. So be aware of that. The trainer, like I said, has been doing this for years. I hope that I never become this coach. I have at times been that coach where, I'm like, this is the system. But, I try to remember never to be that. I try to be more explaining. I try to be more of a teacher. As well as a student at times. I learn from other coaches. I learn from, other organizations. So, but the trainer is stuck in their ways and they're going to do it the same way every time. So, Some people are good with the trainer, but I need a little bit more than that myself. So the coach, right? This is kind of what I'm trying to evolve to myself. And any coach I hope is trying to evolve to. I've got 5 different touch points here that I want to talk about that, if you're looking for a coach, these are good things to ask about. Does the coach listen and adapt? And by that, I mean, does the coach listen to your feedback, to your communications, to what you are saying, and adapt your training to that? I'll give you an example. One of my runners has said to me, I need X long run in order to feel comfortable going into this race. And being of the training mentality that we're time based, that we focus on time, it took me a second to step back, and I had to just take off my pretenses that we always train by time and listen to this athlete and understand that their mental state would improve because they were doing X amount of miles on their long run. That was valid. That's a valid argument. It's just like people that say, well, I need to have some marathon pace work in, the build up to the marathon. I need to know what it feels like. I need to know I can do it. It's that mental component, right? We're not getting much from it aerobically or cardiovascularly from doing marathon pace work, but the mental component of knowing that you can do it, that you can run at it, and how you feel while you're doing it, that's huge, right? So I understood. I said, I understand. I get it. And they sent me a trail running article and said, there are advantages to adding miles, especially if they're doing it on trail and their runs are slow and they're not getting in a lot of miles. So, again, I had to adapt and say, okay, let's do it. Let's do that long run. Let's put your long runs in miles so that you build confidence that you're getting that time on feet. We just want to make sure they're not doing too much. So we have to watch both ends of the spectrum. Yes, we want to make sure that you're comfortable going into your goal event mentally, and physically. So we're watching both ends of that spectrum. Okay. So listening and adapting. And then learning and evolving. That's the next touch point. Learning and evolving. And that goes back to what I was saying. A certificate for coaching is great, but don't let it just end there. Continue to learn. There are so many different conferences out there that will help you grow. As a track and field coach, I try to learn more and more, not just about my runners, but about field events so that I can help those athletes. I go to the UESCA conference each year to learn more. What's the latest, what the latest and greatest, as I talked about earlier. Can I apply it? Does it work? Is there things that I'm not doing? So continuing to learn and evolve as a coach, that's massive. I would say that, what I was just talking about with, throwing in a mileage for a long run, that's an evolution for me. That's something that I typically haven't done, but understand. And, there are times where I'll say, okay, we're going to do X, distance run as a builder. But, I had to learn from my athlete that, hey, this is how they feel comfortable. This is what's going to hopefully make them more successful because it's giving them the mental piece, right? So evolving and learning, that's a huge component. The third is observing and communicating. Communication is essential on both sides. I always tell my athletes it's a two-way street. I hold you accountable, you hold me accountable. Communicate back and forth and observe what's going on. What are you seeing? What, again, going to the metrics, what's going on? Where's the resting heart rate? Where is the HRV? Where are these numbers? Okay. That's massive. And knowing what those numbers mean so that you can communicate, hey, I'm seeing that the resting heart rate is staying pretty high. HRV has been tanking. What's going on? Like, are you feeling that? Are you feeling tired? Do we need to adjust? And I had one athlete that, feeling tired, but looking at the HRV scores, I'm like, I I don't think it's the HRV. I don't think it's the training. It may be an outside factor. We may need to look at outside factors and see, is there something else going on outside of the training, right? But being observant and communicative, that's a huge component. I would say probably one of the most important in what a coach can do. The fourth point is being present and consistent, right? Um, if you tell an athlete that, you're going to check on them X amount of times per week, you have to do that. You have to, meet what you say you're going to do. Some coaches check in once a week, and if you're okay with that, that's fine. I try to check on my athletes every day. Now, does that happen? Sometimes it doesn't. Like I tell them, hey, I've got to meet, but I let them know. I communicate, hey, I've got to meet this evening. I probably won't get to Training Peaks. Okay. If you have a problem, just text me or email me. Okay. So, but being present and accountable and consistent for these athletes is massive. You have to be there. You have to do your part, and make sure things are going right. That's part of the observation process, is being present and consistent, especially with your feedback, right? That's kind of a huge component, is, providing feedback to these athletes. That's part of the communication process. And lastly, being knowledgeable and teaching. Understanding the principles behind training is huge. If you don't know why you're giving an athlete a workout, what you're expecting from it, and what you're looking for, I mean, you need to learn more. Because if they ask you why and you can't tell them, then that's a problem. Like, why are you doing these workouts? Why am I doing these workouts? Like, what's the point behind it? You have to be able to teach them, right? So they understand. I think I was listening to a podcast with Chrissy Mell, and she said, I want my athletes to be able to coach themselves at some point. I want them to learn enough that, if they go out on their own, they can coach themselves. And I think that's great. Having that knowledge to teach them and make them understand what's going on in these workouts, what to expect, not only from the workout, but from recovery. So, that's a huge part of the coach. Now that comes with time. That's not to say like a new coach is going to know everything and teach you everything. That's hard. But an experienced coach should have that type of knowledge and be able to share it and teach it. So that's where I'm trying to evolve to, is be efficient and effective at each of these. I think these are huge components for any coach. And for anybody listening that's looking for a coach, these are some things that I would suggest looking for in their coach. Okay. The last piece that I want to talk about, and this kind of goes into what I do as coaching. I experience a lot, especially from athletes that are doing a new distance. They have this comparison pitfall, right? They look at what others are doing, and compare themselves and say, "Hey, am I doing enough?" Now, we have to understand, hey, we're all different people with different levels of experience, right? So what you're doing now is totally different than what somebody else is doing. If a person looks at what I'm doing, at full peak training, and they're like, well, he's doing that for training for this, that's what I should be doing. I've been running for over 30 years. I'm on 34 years of running. I've had, tons of miles under my feet and experience. A person that's new to it doesn't and can't do all that. They're going to get tired, they're going to get fatigued, and they're going to get injured. So, don't go into that comparison pitfall. The biggest thing that I'll say is be careful of how you're viewing and using Strava and social media. If you are looking at those and making comparisons, and this goes back to something that Ben talked about when we talked on the Cocodona 250. He got into the Cocodona 250 Facebook group, and he's like, oh my God, they're doing so much training. They're doing X, Y, and Z. And I had to say, hey, Ben, that's not you, man. Like, you're doing your thing. You're training your way. And Ben did it. Ben had an amazing performance at Cocodona. but we did it his way. We trained him individually, right? So if you're using Strava or social media as a comparison platform, I would caution you against it. If you want the training and understand where the metrics are and look and take a deep dive into your training, but you're having a hard time with the distractions of Strava, I suggest using something like Training Peaks or Final Surge. Those two platforms are just you, and if you have a coach, they can look at it, right? That's how I use Training Peaks for training, but that's just between the athlete and I. Nobody else is looking at that. Nobody else is looking at your numbers. So you don't have that comparison. So if Strava is wreaking havoc upon you and your ego and your and your capacity to do the right thing, consider using one of those platforms instead. And especially don't compare yourself to a training partner. You are two very different people. And I've talked about this in the past. And Jennifer and Sandra, who were on here, they talked about, doing the majors, the marathon majors. Two very different people, two very different people, two very different times. And they notice their training is very different. And it is because they're very different runners with very different needs, very different capabilities, right? So your training partner is totally different from you. Their fitness is totally different than yours. Their genetic makeup is totally different than yours. So they may be able to do more than you. And that's okay. That's them. That's what they can do. Focus on you and your capacity, your abilities. Focus on improving yourself. Don't go out there and train too hard just because that's what your training partner is doing, right? Go out there. You can enjoy runs with your friends. I'm not saying not to do that. That's great. Go out and run with people. That's awesome. But maybe not all the time, right? There's certain days where, you need to do your own workout or you need to do your own recovery run, right? It's fine for long runs, medium long runs, regular runs, but, do your thing when you have to do your thing, right? And don't compare yourself to those that you run with because that's not fair. Not fair to you. Okay. So that's the pitfalls that I've been seeing, and I just wanted to kind of stress it. Hey, you're probably doing enough, and some are probably doing too much. So be careful. Okay, be careful out there. All right, guys, that's everything I have for this episode. I appreciate you guys listening. Again, I hope you'll come out for the Truly Tough Cross Country Classic on September 28th. Again, registration is in the show notes. It's on Ultra Sign Up. Details are there. It's going to be a fun event. The trails are amazing. It's a fun course. It's a 5K, and you're doing it for a good cause. So I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody's comments and listening. As always, I super appreciate my folks that contribute on Patreon. Thank you. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you want to talk coaching, please send me a message. All right. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Running is life.